light crowd today, but we'll pick back up, I'm sure. Let me tell you a little bit about the man you see before you. I said this yesterday, and I stand by it. Elvis Presley was the king of rock and roll. Michael Jackson was the king of pop. Eddie Deen is the king of barbecue. And I'm not being facetious. This man knows what he's doing. I'm not even going to begin to tell you his story because he can tell it better than I can. Suffice to say, he's one of my favorite people in the world, whether he can cook a brisket or not. And he's going to fill your head and your stomach. Would you please welcome Eddie Deen?
Hey, thank you, Scott. I'm going to start the cooking show out here on the front. How you doing?
Good, how are you?
What's your name?
Joe.
All right, Joe. Joe, can you ride a bicycle? You ride a bicycle that you turn right to go left? Let me show you how to ride this bicycle. What you got to do is turn right to go left. Okay, so I can even have a conversation and turn right and go left. So, Joe, you think you ride this? Okay, come on, try. We're going to give you $100 if you can ride it. If you can't ride it, I'm going to give you a bottle of my barbecue sauce.
Okay,
all right.
alrighty.
Whatever you do, go real slow.
All right.
So what's happening here, I put an extra gear in my bicycle that you turn right and it goes left. So to ride this bicycle, you got to unprogram your brain.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Ready?
Go slow.
Okay. Whoa.
You see what's happening?
I see. Yeah, that's tricky.
What's happening is Joe's brain is trying to ride that other bicycle, the one he was programmed at 5 years old. You know this guy? Yeah. Who is that guy? My dad. Your dad. So you want to try it?
Come on.
Okay. So he raised you right, huh? You know when to say no.
Oh, it's all the time.
So let's try it again.
Okay.
Looks like you're not going to give it up.
No.
All right. He's trying to make this $100. What's your name? Rachel. He's trying to give that $100 to you. I know what he's doing. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is tricky.
You see what's happening? Y'all see what's happening? You see it? Yeah, it's not going to happen. It takes about 10 hours to be able to get acclimated, your brain programmed to ride this bicycle. But the problem with, if you learn how to ride this bicycle, is that you won't be able to ride a regular bicycle because you gave up your brain to condition to this bicycle. Does that make any sense? Does that make sense? So what we're going to talk about today is how does brisket have anything to do with bicycles? So what I do is teach brisket classes in prison and homeless shelters and inner city schools. So what we figured out is a lot of people, they get programmed in a very specific pattern. And so we've been able to use briskets to get people out of certain patterns. And bicycles is just one of those exercises. So so what I'm doing right now is riding this bicycle and not even thinking about what I'm doing by riding the bicycle. So that's my unconscious brain, which is like a motor in a car. And what Joe was trying to do, he was using his conscious brain, which is like the steering wheel, the brake, and the pedal, which is 10% of your brain. Okay, so the most critical part of the car, if a body and brain's a car, is what? Is it the motor? Is it the steering wheel? Is the brake the pedal? Or is it the intangible driver? It's the driver. So that's what we do. We recognize that if you're in prison or homeless, whatever, you became a car with a motor that's driving the car because there's no intangible driver driving the car. So today what I want to do is focus on this idea of brisket bringing the intangible driver back to the car. Basically what I'm saying is bringing the soul back into the body. And so this idea in Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and in Oklahoma, they wanted the soldiers to have better food experiences. So when I was there, what I recognized, you had a lot of employees in the kitchen, but what you had was employees not cooking from the soul because there was not one. So they were just robotic. And so pretty quickly we got people cooking with their soul, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, the quality of food skyrocketed. Does that make sense so far? Okay, so then I took that idea to a shelter in Dallas and started teaching the same idea and trying to figure out homelessness and drug addiction and all the different things that creates a lot of chaos. So let's get started on brisket. I know that's why you came here. So the intent is to go from, here's this prime raw brisket. The idea is to go from here to what we have underneath this foil here, which is a brisket that's been traveling on a smoker for about 16 hours. So y'all want to be able to stay and enjoy the party because I'm going to be serving this brisket out here in a little bit. Are y'all okay with that? Okay, so can we get some pictures of what we got here? Can y'all see the juiciness? Can you see the excitement? So basically, as a caterer, I'm pretty well known as a caterer that's catered over 87,000 guests for George W. Bush. We had a 12-day notice to be in Washington, D.C. to feed 32,000 people. They were having troubles in Florida counting votes. Y'all remember that? You know, had to go to the Supreme Court. You remember that? So I get a call, Eddie, can you cater an inauguration in Washington? And it was 12 days. Well, that became kind of my trademark, is ability to set the stage to create incredible outcomes. Red Cross called me after Hurricane Katrina, and what they were looking for is somebody to feed everybody coming out of the Superdome. So they called me at 11 to feed 13,000 people at 7 o'clock that evening. Are y'all with me? So I didn't even call my employees because I didn't want anybody to say no. So I figured it out how to get it done where everybody said yes. And so I improv that afternoon. So I called U.S. Food Service, hey, can y'all deliver all this food? They knew what was going on to the Dallas Convention Center. They said, yeah. So they sent me groceries like vegetables and all the different things. And so I called Pilgrim's Pride and I said, you have a chicken that's already cooked and already cooked and frozen. All I need to do is heat and serve. I said, do you have this product? And I had wrote down on my desk 5,500 pounds. I said, well, yeah, we got that product, he said. I said, can you deliver it to the Dallas Convention Center in 1 hour? He said, yeah, we'll make it happen, because they knew what was going on. I said, well, how much do you have? He said, look on the computer, he said 5,500 pounds. I didn't tell him how much I need. I just told him what the situation was. So they had the chicken to the Dallas Convention Center. So now I go to the Convention Center, which my office, Eddie Deen's Ranch, is right next to the Convention Center. So I go over across the parking lot to the Convention Center, and I said to the guy who runs it, I said, hey, can I borrow a kitchen? And he said, why? I said, well, all these people is coming to Dallas. He said, well, we can't do it. We can't feed these people. And he said, no, you can't have a kitchen. And I said, well, they're coming to your house, not my house. And he, yeah, well, we can't do this. And I said, well, you understand, they're coming to your house anyway. So anyway, he allowed me to use a kitchen, and we fed 26,000 meals that weekend, plus had a team going to New Orleans to feed all the guys with Encore. So that's kind of the history of my life is in the world of catering. Before I got here yesterday, we fed about 1,700 people for Ross Pro Jr. And Pro Systems, or the Heritage, his nonprofit group. He was feeding a lot of military guys for Memorial Day weekend. So as a caterer, my daughter started setting up all these barbecue classes. And I was charging about $175 a person. So imagine, y'all got in here for class for free, but $175 a class. And I started to see this incredible pattern. You can follow me on this pattern. Okay, so the key to cooking brisket, you got to have a vision, which is 195 degrees Fahrenheit. That's our goal. Are y'all with me? Can you see a vision? You got to have a vision. That's one. Number two, there's laws that govern how to cook a brisket. So basically, you got to know the secrets, the laws that govern how to. So you got to buy quality meat. You got to have the right wood. You got to have the right smoker. You got to have the right mindset. The whole bit. There's laws. Number 3, there's energy that you got to put in it, which is a smoker. And all energy is tied to information. So we want to go with 225 degrees. So we got the smoker going. And so we got this fire in the firebox at 225 degrees. So now we go get the brisket. Here we put salt and pepper. Let's say it's 35 degrees, and there's going to be a process. So as you watch this brisket, in the first 4 hours, this is time, it'll go up in about 100 degrees in 4 hours. So it'll get to 140. But there's something very peculiar about brisket that at 140 degrees, even though you put 225 degrees in there, you go out there in 5 hours and it's still 140 degrees. You go out there in 6 hours and maybe 142 degrees, 145 degrees. So you move really quickly in 4 hours from 35 to 140, but now we call it the stall. The brisket's stalling out. Do you know why it's stalling out? What's causing it? Hey, Scott, I know you know, Chad. You've been here third time.
Mic up here to you, sir. Is it the juices that's inside cooling the meat down?
It's the water that's inside. It's the water. 95% of the weight of the brisket is water. Y'all got to memorize that. Y'all got it down? 95% of the weight is of the brisket is water. The weight is water. So you got what you have happening at 140. You start evaporating. This water starts evaporating, and it's cooling off the muscle. It keeps evaporating, cooling off the muscle. So we started in the barbecue world. They call it the stall. The stall. So it's stalling out. Well, when I started in business 40 years ago, whatever, I knew the laws that govern how to cook brisket, so I knew how to move through the stall. But a lot of my competition back then, 40 years ago, no internet, it's hard to communicate, hard to find out any information. All my competition had tough, dry brisket. And they would pour barbecue sauce all over it, whatever, maybe put in the oven and try to get it tender. And that was my competition. So I would compete with basically all these different barbecue places in Texas that had really tough, dry brisket. So the key here is in this barbecue class, over and over and over, I started looking at this water, and this brisket has this resistance in it. And so if you get to 160, there's an enzyme called cathepsin, cathepsin. It's an enzyme in the muscle that'll start breaking down the connective tissue, the collagen proteins, that makes it tough. But you got to get to 160 for that to happen. At 122, it'll activate, but it won't do any work till you get to 160. Are y'all with me so far? So now we're at the tipping point. Now we're on the way to the promised land. We'll get to 180. We'll take this brisket, wrap it up in butcher paper or foil, whatever you choose. Then we move on to 195. We'll take it then, put it in an ice chest and let it set. So this brisket here has probably been set in 4 or 5 hours. Are y'all okay with it? So I started seeing this very identical pattern. The process will go up real quick. There'll be a lot of resistance. There'll be a stall. We'll hit a tipping point, and we're on the way to the promised land. Y'all see that? Then I also, while I was cooking and showing people how to cook brisket, I was also working in homeless shelters. So put that camera back on. Can you see this? Okay, you got a handout with you. So basically you can see these patterns. You'll see this line right here is the process. Y'all see that? Y'all see the tipping point? Y'all see this energy? Y'all see those? So I started seeing life in those 3 different lines. I see everything in those 3 different lines. So when Red Cross called me at 11 o'clock to feed 13,000 people, I had to have a vision. Y'all see that? I knew there's laws that govern how to do what I do. I know I had to put the right energy into it, and I got to take everybody to the promised land. So I saw everything in this 4 steps: vision, laws, energy, and the process. Does that make sense, Joe? Daughter, are we good? You good? Okay, so, he lost $100. He didn't ride the bicycle. So So the objective is, in the homeless shelters that I was teaching in, I realized there's 4 steps. If you want to get out of becoming a raw brisket to a cooked brisket, you got to go through a process. And the process was, you got to have a vision, there's laws that govern, there's energy that you got to put into it, and there's going to be a process. So when I teach in prisons, for the first time ever, I had a warden get on my bicycle the other day. First time. Most wardens said, hey, I'm good, not interested. Well, 2/3 of everybody coming out of prison go back in 3 years. So to get a warden to say, yeah, that is huge, huge. Then he had all his lieutenants get on the bicycle. Of course, nobody can ride the bicycle because they're programmed to ride the other bicycle. But at least he allowed me to walk in and present this. So I gave this to over 250 inmates. We walked through the whole process with the idea that this is the first time potentially I give a recipe that you do not have to go back to prison after you get out, since 2/3 go back in 3 years. Are y'all with me? Is that making sense so far? So in July, I got the opportunity to go to Portland, Oregon, and take my bicycle and my briskets to work with a program in the VA. They're looking at the cause of veteran suicide. Well, we already know what it is. They get in orbit. They get in this orbit right here. You got me back on camera? This orbit right here. So what happens to a veteran? They'll go from shame, guilt, apathy, and grief, fear, desire, anger, and pride. Somebody knocks them off the pride, and they'll go back to shame. Then they'll start the process. They'll go shame, guilt, apathy, and greed. They'll work themselves back to the ego, the pride. Somebody will say something happens, some trigger. Next thing they'll go back to shame. So they'll do this so many times, and one day they said they're not going to do this anymore. And that's the moment. And there's too many veterans are committing suicide in the veteran hospital's parking lot. So the objective is to stop this phenomena that basically is a reflection of our country and our government and the lives in the military. So I am passionate about taking this, what I call as a cultural conscious meter, into the military. I've already started in the prisons. It's already been in the homeless shelters. I've been working with one shelter for the last over a decade, and very high, incredible success. Over 4,000 what used to be homeless people are now calling their own plays in life. They became a cooked brisket, basically. Does that make any sense? They went from this to this. They went from riding a bicycle that didn't get them anywhere to riding a new bicycle. Does that make sense? They went from a deflated basketball to putting air back in the basketball. Does that make any sense? So that's what I do for fun, is I show people how to cook brisket, but there's really nothing about brisket. It's about life. So we're working on a program right now, Life is a Brisket. Is that a good name for a book, John? I don't know. But anyway, that's my story. Scott, you got anybody out there, you got any questions about what we're doing here?
Whether it's a real brisket or the figurative brisket. Anybody got a question for Eddie Deen?
What I'm going to do is I'm going to start slicing this brisket up here, so y'all have to wait forever. But really, anybody got a question out there?
Got one up front, Mr. Deen. Let me see. Get up here. Yes, sir.
What do you find is the best way to get people to break through? Because I mean, I understand. First of all, I finally really get the point of the bicycle, because I understand that what that is really showing people that the way they've always thought is not going to take them where
John,
they want to go.
talk a little. Yeah, there you go. Now,
the way they've always thought is not going to take them where they want to go if it's someplace new.
Give me that question. What's the question?
Well, the question is how do you get people to break through to go past the tipping point?
You're talking about my audience.
Your audience.
What I do is I trickle. Like I'll come in and say, hey, I'll give you $100 like Joe to ride my bicycle. And he'll get on the bicycle and he'll try. What we're looking for is Joe to come back and ask me a question. Why can't I ride the bicycle? Well, you can't ride the bicycle because you're not dealing with my bicycle. You're dealing with the other bicycle, Joe. The one you were programmed at 5 years old. So what does that mean? Well, in that shelter, I asked these ladies, when did you perceive your power control was taken away? And so I had 20 ladies tell me a story of a 5-year-old. You know, sexual abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse, whatever it was. It was story after story after story of adverse childhood experiences. We've had stories of, there was a guy in California, it's three-year-old. He was actually sold. He was sold at 3 years old. So you imagine, how are you supposed to put that in context? So anyway, that's where the basketball came from. His name was, well, I won't say it. His name was Deen. And so he started telling me the most horrible story I've ever heard in my life of being raised by a mother. You know, you're sold, then you're raised with these predators. You're just a mess, you know. So he told that story. I never heard such a story in my life. So then I just put a knife in a basketball. And all of a sudden, then I threw him the basketball. I said, Damon, you got to fix the basketball. I said, I'll tell you how to put air back in the basketball, but you got to fix the wound. So anyway, he went back and he went to sleep last night. And I called him the next day and I said, well, how did you sleep? He says it's the first time he'd slept in 30 years, all night. He said he slept like a baby. So what I do is I trick them. I got all kinds of exercises, over 100 exercises. One of them is a piano. So I don't start you on the piano. What I do is start you on a keyboard.
Mr. Deen?
So I got a two-dimensional keyboard. Okay, so what I do here is I'll show you these patterns on this keyboard. And if you can follow these patterns, well, guess what? You can go to a real piano and play the pattern. So what we started figuring out is that I had 30 kids do that in 30 minutes, play a piano recital. And so all I'm doing, I guess you can put me back on camera again. You got it? Are you with me? Oh, there it is. So what I'm doing, I'm playing this F with my thumb. I'll do this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So left hand will be doing this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you come down here to this F. And you drop these two fingers down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, I can get a fifth grader to do that in a minute. You know, some of you guys might take 5 minutes, but typically not over 10 minutes. I got everybody doing that pattern. So then you go to a real piano, and for the first time you'll play that whole pattern, and you'll just be shocked because you didn't know there's a pianist inside of you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
There's a soul inside of you. That's the pianist. That's the intangible driver we're talking about. So what we're doing is just tricking people to believe they have the power to create an outcome that was always within them.
It's really the acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement. What we're saying there is, if you'll see, you got me back on, I'm working these guys to death back there. Okay, so basically, let's get rid of this one. There you go. So right here is acknowledgement. What do you acknowledge? You got to acknowledge the water that you're drowning in. So 95% of the weight of the brisket is water, 95% of your brain is water. So a lot of people are in their brain. Well, you're not in the brain. You own the brain. All of a sudden, they become the brain. So the first thing you got to do is acknowledge the water that you're drowning in that you cannot see. So we can move these guys out of severe drowning. We call them lone horses. You know, that's where the mass shooter is down here, a lone horse. So we can get you to acknowledge and get you to just drowning by just telling a joke. There's one story. He's 16 years old now, and great kid. And when he was 5 years old, I was teaching him quantum mechanics. So I'd take an object like a chair, and I said, what is this if somebody's sitting in it? And he said, chair. I said, what happens if I stand on it? What is it? He says, a stool. It could be a ladder. I said, what happens if I hit you over the head with it? He said, I'm going to tell Mama. See, some of y'all laugh. All ideas got you out of potentially grief. I can tell jokes in a prison or a homeless shelter, and all of a sudden we shift them out of shame or guilt or sadness, and all of a sudden they're got a different demeanor. So all we're doing is teaching them basically to acknowledge, hey, wait a minute, who's laughing? Who's playing the piano? Who's cooking the brisket? Who has the power to create an outcome?
Yeah, well, then I can see the tipping point really becomes the curiosity that
you got to be a child again.
Right. You start to get them to think, well, what's going on here?
I got to take Damon before he was sold by his mama. I got to get him back where he was a 3-year-old, I guess, before he was sold. So that's what we do. We teach people how to go back and change adverse childhood experiences. Change stories, become a completely different personality. Any other question out there?
Anybody else? That was a great story. Everybody smell that brisket? I'm not the only one. It smells great.
Anybody else? Anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to always be here at ZestFest. What I like about ZestFest is all these people here, they got air in their basketball. They got to take a chance. They got to call their own play. So those are the things that we're trying to help develop in our society. We want to actually create a school. I was talking to the superintendent the other day, and I said, he said, what are we going to do with elementary? I said, every kindergarten needs 10 customers. What are they going to do with 10 customers? I don't care. Produce a product and service, but they got to manage their 10 customers. They got to wow their audiences. They got to constantly come forth with a new product or service, and so now they're ready to go get the math, science, and reading they need because they got 10 customers. Then we help them develop 20 customers in first grade, 40, 80. We need them to start looking at, how does Amazon work? How does corporation work? How does the world work? So education should be about you calling your own plays. Instead of testing you for your acquisition of knowledge, we should be testing your application. How do you apply knowledge? How do you wow an audience? That's what I love about this show is because these people took a chance. They believed in themselves, they started calling their own play, and they came out here today and knocked it out of the park. Is that?
Mr. Deen, I'll tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
When I was the boss back for the federal courts in Atlanta, we would have applicants, and they would come in and look like $1 million on paper. They had law degrees, they had master's degrees, a couple of them had PhDs, but they had only worked, if they had worked, they had worked at a retail environment or a restaurant, which is great work. But we were working with people that want to work in court and know the law. And if somebody only had a bachelor's degree but had 10 years of experience, I'd take that person because they had practically applied their application rather than just sit in a classroom and deal in theory all day.
Yeah, that's going to be the future. It's called hudagogy. Hudagogy is your self-determinism. Pedagogy, which is the current educational system for the last 120 years, which was driven by Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller, what they wanted is factory workers. Well, artificial intelligence coming at us at light speeds, well, we don't need more obedient people. We need people that can actually make a hot sauce, cook a brisket. It's going to be the trades that's going to be the most popular portion of the schools, where all of a sudden you actually can apply knowledge. Because anything that basically if you go to school and all you've done is accumulated knowledge, how are you going to compete with machine learning? I mean, it's so simple. We got to create a completely different educational system. So we're working on that. Forney High School, Forney schools. We got a chicken place in there. It's hot chicken. It's called Mary Sue's. My mom was named Mary Sue, so we got Mary Sue's hot chicken. So the whole objective is to teach kids basically how to run their own business. Any other questions out here before I feed you guys?
I think they're ready to eat, Mr. Dean. It smells incredible out here.
Also, we're taking a commercial break right now. I got two friends over here. Chad's going to talk about his knife.
Got it?
You see Chad over here?
Chad with Rebec's Cutlery. Here we go. Chad, tell us about it.
Thank you all for coming. This has been an awesome opportunity here to display our cutlery. What he's cutting with is a 10-inch Damascus knife. It's sharpened at a 15-degree angle. We use rosewood handles. We design all the knives ourselves. We're out of Des Moines, Iowa. They literally just tear through. The two knives on our booth that we use a German steel and Damascus steel knife. We're at 64 shows. We have not sharpened them yet. This is still the factory edge. You can take a tomato, cut it in half, lay it out there, and run a knife through it without any effort. Just take a skin the outside of a tomato. We kind of started out kind of the same way what he's talking about. We had a cookware business for 20 years, and basically COVID kind of put us out of business. It shut down all the bridal shows, and so we decided to not give up, and we took a set of knives that we were vendoring for a third party.
Why don't you take
and
it
went
over
to,
there and serve it?
Went to gun shows. Gun shows didn't care about COVID, so we started out with doing our knives that doing a set of knives there that we were third party vendoring. Well, we sold a lot of knives, but then Amazon came along and got the rights to sell the same knives, and we're cutting our price in half. The knife we were selling for $800 or $1,000, they were selling for $600. You can't compete with that. So we decided that we would make our own line of knives. I was a chef for 15 years. I worked in that industry. I came up with an interest in cooking, so I put some numbers to paper and found a manufacturer to build them for us, and that's what we came up with. So that's kind of how we come as a business. If we're booth 320. Eddie's been awesome to let us do that. He's up there playing with a couple of our knives. So thank you, Eddie. Thank you for everything you do. You're a
Hey, you'll need
wonderful
to buy
person.
one of these knives. Hey, I got one other person over there. Before I left the commissary, I smoked some chicken. So you got some of your hot season?
Where's that?
Right there. He's got to get air in his basketball. He's over there just wallowing over there. He tried to ride my bicycle yesterday, so I thought since he participated in our show yesterday, he can get a chance.
Preston Lively, this is my sister Patrice, and we sell a hot spice called PT Deli's Fire Dust.
You got to talk out loud.
And we're in booth 120 over there, and it's delicious, all-purpose. We call it like a WD-40. I'd like y'all to try it if y'all get a chance. And I want to thank everybody here, and especially Eddie for giving me a shot at it. Thank you.
What's the name of the product one more time?
PT Deadly's Fire Dust.
Deadly's Fire Dust. You can find it in 121, you said? 120 on that side of ZestFest. Well, they're bringing out sampling, Mr. Deen, and they're gonna abandon you here in a minute and start eating brisket.
Yeah, let's get everybody in line. You got some tongs?
We'll have sampling under both big screen televisions eventually. We'll start over here on the right side. But first, how about a big hand for the man himself, Eddie Deen. He's back there already working. Thank you, Mr. Deen. It's always an honor and a pleasure.